and Governor Jim Hunt, we have been friends almost, gosh, I'm embarrassed by this, almost 35 years. And he and Carolyn and Hillary and I shared a lot of experiences going all the way back to the late 1970s. I believe he's one of the best governors America's had in the last 50 years of
You're the best president,
I want to thank Senator Kay Hagan for being here and for her leadership. And Congressman David Price and his wife Lisa have been friends of ours for a long time. Former Congressman Bob Etheridge. Thank you, Governor Bev Perdue. And thank you, Lieutenant Governor Walter Dalton, and good luck in that election. We need you to win. Senator Dan Blue, thank you for the help you gave me 20 years ago, and thanks for still being here. And I want to thank Mayor Nancy McFarland, the Raleigh Parks and Recreation Department, and the St. Augustine Marching Band for playing today. Thank you. I used to do that, and I can tell you it's harder to do in cold weather than warm weather. There are a lot of people here trying to help the president get reelected, but when I was just back in the tent there, I looked up and saw my friend, the great pro basketball player Derek Fisher, who came all the way to North Carolina to help President Obama. Thank you very much. Folks, the hour is late, but you can still make a difference in this election. North Carolina can once again support Barack Obama. And, you know, we had a pretty good convention here not very long ago. And I had the honor to speak and make the case for President Obama. But I've been listening to all this back and forth, and I hope that I have some credibility with the people of this state on jobs and incomes and education and getting rid of deficits and bringing the national debt down. And so here's what I want to say to you. There are 5 simple reasons that I am more enthusiastic about President Obama this time than I was last time when I worked hard for him. And why I think it is just as important that he win this election as that he was elected in 2008. Number one, he's got the right philosophy. You saw him working after Hurricane Sandy when he left the campaign trail and worked with the Republican governor of New Jersey, the Democratic governors of New York and Connecticut, the independent mayor of New York City. He was so impressed, he endorsed him for president. You saw it when he tried to make a deal with the Republicans in Congress on the budget and offered them unilaterally, without asking for anything, $1 trillion in spending reductions over the next decade. They said no. But he said the door's still open. And they'll walk through that door when you re-elect him day after tomorrow. And he knows that politics is about other people, not about power, not about ideology. He knows that a philosophy of we're all in this together is a heck of a lot better than you're on your own. And not just when natural disaster strikes. I mean, look, I spend a lot of time now in my foundation work. I get support from Democrats and Republicans and independents, and half the time we're working in America or somewhere around the world, I don't even know what the politics of the people who are helping me are, because they all have one thing in common. They want to make a difference. And when you really want to make a difference in other people's lives, instead of lift your own position, you leave your ideological baggage at the door and you work on what's good for people. You cooperate and you keep score in the only way that matters. Are people better off when you quit than when you started? The children have a brighter future? Are things coming together instead of being torn apart? If you look at Raleigh, if you look at the stunning long-term success of this area. It is symbolized by the research triangle, by cooperation between business and government and the university system, by all these foundations and everybody working together. That's what works. There's a reason Orlando, Florida has 100 computer simulation companies, because the government and the private sector work together to do that. And the University of Central Florida changes the curriculum every semester to put people in the jobs that are opening. There's a reason San Diego, California is the human genome research capital of the world. Same deal, public, private, foundation, people working together. Ever since the Tea Party took over the Republican Party, they say it's my way or the highway. We're right all the time. They beat the distinguished Republican senator from Indiana, Richard Lugar, their most important foreign policy spokesperson, because he was attacked by his opponent for cooperating with President Obama on national security. Their nominee actually said, I couldn't make this up, that his happiest day was when he was imposing his opinion on someone else, and he wanted the people to send him to Washington so that he could have more partisanship in Washington, D.C. Now, if you want it, you can have it. The people of Indiana don't want it. Congressman Joe Donnelly, his opponent, was ahead by 11 points in the most recent poll. We're going to change that. But it'll all be for naught if you reward them by not electing President Obama. If you want cooperation over conflict, if you want people to walk through the same door and sit down at the same table and behave like grown-ups, you have to re-elect President Obama. Second reason I'm for him is he's been a good commander-in-chief. He has been a good commander-in-chief. He has ended the war in Iraq. He's bringing the troops home from Afghanistan. He is modernizing the American military. He is fighting terror, and he is vigorously pursuing diplomacy to make a world with more partners and fewer adversaries. And he's got a heck of a Secretary of State. The third reason I'm for him is, and this is one of the big two issues in the election, really, is that he was dealt a tough hand. You remember in 2007 and 2008, when the primary campaigns were going on, and then Senator Obama and Senator Clinton and Senator Biden and others crossed this country for 2 years, talking about what we had to do because the economy already was so weak. Flat wages, rising poverty, no new jobs. We were already, with trickle-down economics, in the dumps. They did just what Governor Romney wants to do again. Had big tax cuts for upper-income people, cut back on everything else, weaker regulation on Wall Street. And what happened? In 7 years, from the end of the little dot-com crash till the big crash in 2008, in 7 years, they had 2.6 million private sector jobs. Not counting the crash against President Bush. Then what happened? 6 weeks before the presidential election, the crash occurs. The biggest crash since the Great Depression. For a brief period, we had bipartisanship again. President Bush and his Treasury Secretary asked the Congress not to let the financial system fail. John McCain and Barack Obama went back and did the right thing for our country, even though he knew it was politically unpopular. Then President Obama had to do it again. And he put a floor under the crash. He stopped it from becoming a depression. And he did it in a way that required all those loans to be paid back with interest. You've been paid back. You made a profit on saving the financial institutions of the country. Thank you, Barack Obama. But then we began the long slide back. We have been clawing and climbing our way back. For 33 months, we have gained jobs. Now keep in mind, under trickle-down economics, you got 2.6 million jobs in 7 years. In 33 months, under Obama's economic policy of invest and grow, 5.5 million jobs, more than twice as many in less than half the time. So, when Governor Romney says, oh, the economy's terrible, we left him a mess, he didn't fix it fast enough, fire him, put me in. You say, I'm sorry, Governor, but you want to do what we did before, and America's doing better than Europe. America's doing better than we did before the crash under trickle down. And we're just getting warmed up. We're going to reelect Barack Obama. I am for President Obama because he'd be a better decider-in-chief. That's what George Bush once said. Remember that? Remember that? George W. Bush once said, the president is the decider-in-chief. And lots of folks made fun of him, but actually he told the truth. That's what the president is. So let's just compare the deciders. Barack Obama decided to sign the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act for women. Which, by the way, is not just a women's issue. Anybody like me that grew up in a house where you had a working mother and a working father knows that any man with half good sense wants his wife to be paid an equal amount for the same work because it makes raising the kids a whole lot easier and it's good for the country. Well, Governor Romney, who keeps telling us how decisive he is. Hey, I look like a president. I act like a president. I talk like a president. So, this law's been on the books for 2 years, right? We all know what it does. And in a second debate, they said, well, Governor, would you have signed the bill? I had a bunch of binders with women's names going through them. Let me tell you something, folks. In the next 4 years, the President of the United States is going to make a heck of a lot harder decisions than answering yes or no to whether you would have signed a bill that's already on the books. That's another reason I want Barack Obama to be the next president of the United States. President Obama decided to save the American automobile industry. And he didn't bail them out. He made labor give up some concessions and management give up some concessions. We put in some money. Our loans have been paid back. The bankruptcy judge said there was no way to avoid liquidating General Motors and Chrysler if the government wasn't part of the deal. What happened? We saved 1 million jobs. This is a big deal in the South. All the German and Japanese companies that make cars in the United States, they all supported this bailout, even though they didn't get a penny. Why? Because they know we're all in this together. It works better than you're on your own. They knew if General Motors stopped buying auto parts, the auto parts suppliers would shut down and they would be toast. So they were all for it. So what happened? First, we saved 1 million jobs, and there are today 250,000 more people making cars than they were the day Barack Obama became president of the United States. Governor Romney was against it. He made a decision. It was the wrong one, but he made a decision. And then, in this sort of extreme makeover, he has been tying himself in knots trying to say he didn't say what he clearly said. I told somebody the other day, he had tied himself in so many knots trying to wiggle out of this auto deal, because in Ohio, 1 in 8 jobs is tied to cars, that he has been offered a job as the chief contortionist at the Cirque du Soleil. So, that didn't work. So what did he do? He said that the president was going to allow Jeep to move jobs from Ohio to China. And that kind of burned me up, because I actually helped the government of Ohio open that Jeep plant in my second term as president. And I know that they just said in Toledo they're going to spend $500 million more there, hire more people, and produce new lines. And they're expanding up in Michigan. Why should you care? You should care whether your president's telling you the truth or not. You should care whether your president is telling you the truth or not. So anyway, Jeep said, Governor, it's not true. We're not cutting back in America. We used to have a plant in China. We're going to reopen there. Costs Jeep's way too much money for us to push them and produce them in America and put them on a ship and sell them over there. Freight cost is too much. But we're building up in America. We're not moving jobs anywhere. Then Chrysler, which owns Jeep, said that. They kept on saying it. Then even General Motors got under the act. The head of General Motors said, stop this. We are not having this. Chrysler is building up jobs in America. And then that wasn't enough either. So then, Governor, you know, Jeep belongs to Chrysler, and Fiat, an Italian company, has a dominant position in Jeep. So, I can't make this up. So then the Romney campaign says, the president is working with the Italians to move jobs to China. Sounds like a pilot for a new television series. An international conspiracy. It's bad enough that he wouldn't support the president's immigration reform so we could let young people from Latin America and North Africa and the Middle East stay here if they serve in the military and go to college. Now they're going after the Italians. You know, next week it'll be the Irish and I'll be toast. Now, when I was a kid and I got caught with my hand in the cookie jar, I turned red in the face and I took my hand out of the cookie jar before my mother whipped me. Governor Romney gets his hand caught in the cookie jar. He just digs down for more cookies. This is unbelievable. So after they got rebuked by General Motors, rebuked by Chrysler, rebuked by Jeep, they put this charge on the air and they increased the ad buy because they think, what the heck? Who cares whether it's true or not? People are scared to death about losing their jobs. We got more money than the Democrats do. We got all this secret super PAC money, all these people that are going to get these big handouts and tax cuts when we get elected. We'll just scare the living daylights out of people. In the beginning, it worked for a day or two. You had people in the plants coming up saying, are you moving our jobs to China? I want a president who will decide to level with the American people and not try to terrify them with false charges. I want Barack Obama as president. Now, the fifth reason I'm for him is by far the most important reason. His plans for the future are better. And basically, he's asking us to do three things together. He said we need to increase our investments in the kind of things that built the research triangle. the 21st century way. We need to invest in a modern infrastructure, including faster computer download speeds with modern rural broadband all across America so people in rural America can make a living in the 21st century economy. We need to invest in modern manufacturing. We need to invest in clean energy. There are now more than 110,000 people making a living in the solar industry in America, and more than 75,000 making a living in the wind industry. He says, and it's just the beginning, we rank first or second in the world in the capacity to generate energy from the sun and the wind. On a spring day that was particularly sunny in Germany, a country 1/4 our size where the sun shines on average as much as it does in London, not much. They generated enough solar power last spring to equate to 20 nuclear power plants. And it's given the country 300,000 jobs. Now keep in mind, they're 1/4 our population with about 1/2 our capacity. We should have over 1 million jobs in this. And Barack Obama has helped us to move back into the lead in this important technology. Mitt Romney, he wants to get rid of them. If you do, you should vote for him. If you don't, you should vote for President Obama. But he wants to invest in all these new areas where we can generate jobs. Then he wants to educate people to take the jobs. Not just four-year college degrees. He wants non-college educated middle-aged workers who hadn't had a pay raise in 4 or 5 years to be able to go back to school and get a job where they can be part of a 21st century economy where their incomes are rising. But the college graduate thing is really important. Jim Hunt talked about this a little bit, but I'll just give you one example. Every year there are 120,000 openings in the United States, 120,000 for computer science graduates. The whole university system in the whole country only graduates 40,000. We are leaving 80,000 jobs on the table. So the president wants to invest in research and development capacity at these schools so we can have more centers of excellence like the Research Triangle. And he wants to deal with the most troubling education factor of all. We still right near the top of the world in the percentage of our young people who go to college, but we've dropped to 15th in the percentage of our young people with college degrees. And we all know why. I mean, it got more expensive, the economy got weak, people got scared of borrowing more money, they were afraid they could never pay it back. The student loan reform that President Obama signed that becomes fully effective next year is the single most important piece of reform legislation that nobody in America seems to know about, and it's a big issue in this election. We've got a lot of young people here. I want you to listen to me. Here's what it does. The old student loan system spent lots of money paying fees to banks to make their loans and then guaranteeing the loans. Under the new system, the government sets aside a loan reserve, and North Carolina State, University of North Carolina, Wake Forest, you name it, any school here, they say, here are the students eligible for our loan program. They get the money at a lower interest rate. But far more important, for the first time, beginning next year, if you reelect the president, every single college student in the country with a federal student loan will have the option to repay that loan as a low fixed percentage of income for up to 20 years. And think of this. This means nobody will ever have to drop out of college again because they're scared they can't repay their loan. And believe it or not, it's $60 billion cheaper over 10 years than the old system. So the Congress voted, I see Bob Esser's nodding his head up and down, the Congress voted to take that money and guarantee increases in Pell Grants for a decade to keep up with inflation, and to make sure that the Hope Scholarship tax credit that started when I was president and all the other middle class tax credits to help people pay for their kids' education are maintained. Now, what's the Romney position? You are not going to believe this. But I couldn't make it. The Romney position is we're going to have to cut all that investment in education and cut all that investment in new technology to pay for these humongous tax cuts for high-income people, because I know it'll work this time. It hasn't worked in decades, but I think it'll work this time. He wants to repeal that too. I'm getting that. He wants to repeal the student loan law, give the $60 billion back to the banks, raise the cost of student loans, and make them harder to repay by ending your ability to limit your repayment to a low fixed percentage of your income, which means we will continue to drop in the international rankings and the percentage of our kids with degrees. It's a recipe for disaster. It's a triumph of ideology over evidence. The evidence is if you give more kids so they can repay their loans, they will repay them, they will save the taxpayers' money by repaying them, and they will acquire the ability to make a much better living. Why would we repeal it? If you want evidence of what works over ideology and following the money, you better vote to re-elect Barack Obama and make sure he transforms. Finally, I'm for President Obama because he has a plan to reduce the debt. I think the two biggest issues that are even making this election close are too many people believing that we could have healed all the damage from the financial crash in 4 years. Governor Romney says that, but it's not true. Every expert in the world on financial crisis has pointed out that one as bad as the one we suffered normally take 10 years to get over. So I called one of them, Professor Kenneth Rogoff at Harvard, who won the Nobel Prize, and he said, yeah, that's right, they take about 10 years. I said, can we beat this? He said, yeah, this is America, we can beat this if we do the right thing. We can beat this. But I said, could anybody have brought us back in 4 years? He said, no way, no how, no serious person would even think that was true. The president has outperformed Europe. He outperformed his predecessor. He deserves a chance to finish the job. And he deserves a chance to tackle the debt. Now, the Republicans say this debt is a big problem. They had a debt clock at their convention. You remember that? Governor Romney attacks the president every time he opens his mouth about the debt. But he often forgets to tell you things. He forgets to tell you that until the Republicans trickled down to America 30 years ago, in the history of this country, we never ran large, permanent, structural deficits in peacetime. Trickle down did that to us. This idea that the government would mess up a two-car parade, that there was no such thing as a bad tax cut, especially for us. We quadrupled the debt before I took office, in 12 years before I took office. Then I gave you 4 years of declining deficits and 4 surplus budgets. And then they double the debt again. He just wants all the voters to forget about that and say, oh, look how much it went up under Obama. Let me tell you something. You ought to try it. If you take office in the middle of a financial crash where nobody's making a living, the tax revenues will go down and your costs will go up paying for unemployment and feeding your neighbor's kids. And it's what we ought to do. And yeah, the president did that stimulus. You know what the stimulus went for? 36% to a $3,600 tax cut for 98% of the American people. About a third of it for aid to state and local governments so they wouldn't have to lay off so many teachers and police officers and firefighters and nurses. and a third of it to create some jobs for the future. The president has a budget that will reduce the debt $4 trillion. Meets the first test of every budget, arithmetic. $2 in tax cuts, spending cuts, for every $1 in tax increases, all paid for by those of us, I love saying this, never had a nickel to left the White House, by those of us who got the economic benefits of the last decade and got the benefit of the tax cuts of the last decade. All they're asking us to do is to kick in a little so we can deal with this terrible debt. It's what the Simpson-Bowles Commission recommends. Okay, so Romney says this is a terrible idea. So where's his budget? See me about that after the election. Well, the first thing, don't forget, Governor Romney wants to cut taxes $5 trillion on top of the debt we have. 20% across the board with 60% going to the most fortunate American. Then he wants to spend almost $3 trillion over the next decade over and above the spending the president's recommended. He has the gall to attack the president as a big spender. He recommends cutting education, cutting investment in all these areas, and then still proposes to spend $3 trillion, nearly more than President Obama did, including the $110 billion he'll spend by repealing health care, which is a terrible mistake and will hurt our economy, and another reason you should vote to reelect Obama. So he's going to cut all this other stuff, but he won't show you the numbers because they don't add up. He can't even get us back to zero. But let's just assume that he could, with all these cuts, get us back the $5 trillion in tax cuts and the $3 trillion in spending. He still would not have paid down 1 red cent on the debt. Not one. So how are you going to do it? See me about that after the election. I'm a business guy. You don't need to see my buzzing plan. I'm a business guy. Obama's terrible. Don't bother me with the details. And besides, he says, when I'm elected, people will be so ecstatic that America will get 12 million jobs in the next 4 years. Now, I know it just slipped his mind. Or, as President Obama says, we've got this huge public health epidemic in America with this raging virus called Romnesia. And there's so much money from secret sources behind it that it's everywhere in the atmosphere. So we're all vulnerable to it, and maybe he just got a little case of his own condition. But he forgot to tell you that just a few days before he made the 12 million job promise, an independent business forecaster, no politics, an independent business forecaster, Moody's Analytics, said that in the next 4 years, the American economy will produce 12 million jobs based on the changes that have already been made by President Obama if we do not mess it up. In other words, see me after the election about the budget. See me after the election about how I'm going to pay for these tax cuts. Don't bother me with the details. We left him a mess. He didn't fix it all. Throw him out, put us in, so I can get credit for what he did. At the heart and soul, that is their campaign. And they are preying on the anxieties and the fears and the worries of ordinary people instead of lifting their hope and putting their vision in the future. Instead of talking about the president's plan to double car mileage and cut your gas bills in half and reduce the threat of global warming, they want to repeal that and have us use more oil instead of exporting. Instead of talking about how we can build a modern manufacturing country, they're talking about taking Jeep jobs to China in a way they know is blatantly false. You got to vote your hopes instead of your fears, North Carolina. I want you to wake up on election day and think about the research triangle. Think about what works in Raleigh. Think about what works in Charlotte. Thinks about how you could bring that to every nook and cranny of this state. Think about how you could bring the benefits of the modern economy to the rural parts of the state. Think about how you could bring it to people who have lost their jobs and don't have college degrees and need to be part of the modern economy. And I'll tell you how you'll do it. You'll do it through cooperation, not through conflict. You do it by shooting straight with people, not by giving them false ads. You'll do it by giving them a budget based on arithmetic, and you'll do it by investing so we grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up, not from the top down. We are all in this together. We are not